So hello everybody, my name's Bal. It's short for Balbinder, which is a Sikh Punjabi name. It means victorious through strength, if you want a definition. I was born in Leeds. My parents actually came here in the late 1960s to look for work. They worked in the textile mills. And I grew up in Hare Holes to begin with my two siblings. I've always painted, always drawn, and it was encouraged by my parents, which I'm very grateful for. And decided really early on that it was a career path that I wanted to pursue. So I went on to do my A-levels, art being one of them, and straight after A-levels I went to what was Jacob Kramer, which was the art school. It's now Leeds School of Art and Design, or perhaps Leeds Metropolitan University. I think it's changed its name to. Not Leeds Metropolitan, Leeds University of the Arts. And that was a great experience. Those foundation courses kind of give you a taste of everything. And I was there early 90s, and we had life drawing every day. So we were practicing observational skills and, getting the technical skill set that we needed before you kind of veer off into other directions. But we also did a bit of printmaking, sculpting, ceramics, so you kind of got a taste of all the different arts, even textile work to a degree as well, before you kind of settle on your niche or what you're most comfortable with. And it was after that I decided to apply to Hull School of Art and Design. Now they had the most fantastic printmaking department, and it was well known for the facilities and the calibre of teaching. The equipment alone was incredible, huge etching presses, a full room dedicated to silk screen printing. And that's what I started doing when I first got onto the degree course there, doing quite a bit of printmaking, and then I kind of moved a bit into sculpture. So it's been multidisciplinary, my practice. Did a bit of sculpting with beeswax before moving into painting. And after I graduated, I decided that I wanted to kind of pursue the educational side a bit more. So I moved to London, to East London University, to do my MA in fine art, and I solely practiced painting. And that's really the kind of that period that firmed up for me that painting was the path that I wanted to go down, and I've painted ever since.
So we're in the Mercer Gallery, and you've got an exhibition. What's this exhibition about then? We've got all the paintings around us at the moment.
Well, the works here, they've been painted over probably a period of 18 months. And the whole work, I think my work mostly is autobiographical. You're absorbing constantly, and any artist will, tell you this. You're creating memories all the time through observation. You might not be drawing to do this. You might be having a walk in the woods. You might be observing cloud patterns. You might watch a film. So you're kind of stockpiling constantly visual references. And most of my work is probably somehow, it's not conscious, but a lot of those memories kind of seep back out into the painting. I start it's a pragmatic approach really. I might have two, but I always have more than one painting on the go at the moment, at any one time. And that kind of, if something's not quite working on one piece, you can move on to another. Or you can just leave it alone if it's not working as well. That's part of kind of trying to figure out. That's part of the process of painting.
Is that sort of fairly typical then? Because writers talk about writer's block, don't they, and then come back to it. When you approach a painting, do you have something kind of forming in your mind, or do you literally go to the canvas, the blank canvas, and then
every artist is different and they have a different method, but for me, I don't have anything in my head. I'll have a primed board, which might have a couple of layers of gesso, just to give it a nice surface. And then I'll just start by mixing up a colour. If I'm going through my paints and think, oh well, you kind of gravitate towards certain pigments, and I'll just lay a wash down, and then I'll start maybe dripping paint, and then using a brush to actually make marks and start constructing different shapes and areas. And it evolves from there, really.
So does that mean you're more kind of going with the feeling?
Yeah, you
what's
do.
Happening at the time?
Absolutely, yeah. Because when you start laying down shapes and colours, in your mind, you're constantly having to assess whether those shapes are working, whether a certain line's working, whether one colour next to another's working, and it's quite an emotive process. And that kind of drives you through. I mean, I think, you're just saying about writer's block, but they do say writers should just write and artists should just paint. It's when you stop, that's when you've got the block. Because you've got, it's that whole, it's 10% inspiration, and 90% perspiration, for want of a better word. You've just got to drive through it. I think even when things aren't working, and that's 90% of the time. That 10% when something comes together, that's the bit where all the magic happens. And it might not happen for a few days, for a few weeks, or a month or two. I mean, I've left some paintings just to one side, for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. And you go back to it with a fresh eye, and something new appears in it. It's whether something's happened to you, or you're reinterpreting it. You've got other thoughts coming through, and that might not happen, but sometimes it does. And I think that space just to leave a picture or a piece, whilst you go and kind of absorb it, and you're constantly thinking about it, your mind might go back to it, pretty much like, I suppose, a writer would, approach a novel or a piece of poetry. Just allowing yourself the time to think and find a way to navigate, those elements that aren't working, and the passages that are working, how you can kind of keep those in.
So the paintings that we've got around us here, then, are these on canvas or is that the right thing?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So all of these are painted on board. It's primed. A lot of it's 3mm MDF, which are sanded, and then primed with gesso, just to give it a nice surface that your paint can adhere to, and to preserve the longevity of the paint as well. Canvas, I do like painting on canvas, but I find, because I work on the, there's so many layers of paint on each picture, it's a bit more forgiving, the board. I often, you can take a bit of sandpaper to the painting, yeah, take it back off, and it is a lot more forgiving. I find it a lot more forgiving, but I like to build it up in layers anyway, because I think those, often if you look at a lot of the pieces, you'll see that there are bits coming through. Those are the layers underneath, and I think those are just as important as what's actually right there on the surface. It's those bits underneath kind of exist in their own space and their own dimension, and that I find very interesting. How you arrive at that surface conclusion is born of multiple layers of paint and mark making beneath the surface.
And how do you look at a painting? When you see people in art galleries, and they're there sometimes with the fingers, across. How would you, if you went to an art gallery, how would you look at a painting? Is it feelings, or do you use a different eye, more of an artist, analytical eye? Yeah,
I think it's such an individual thing, because my experiences will be completely different to yours. I've seen more paintings, probably working in the gallery business as well, pass through the doors than most people will see in a lifetime. So you become kind of visually literate, for want of a better word. So I've got kind of all that, and having studied art history as well, you know, I approach it as with a different mindset, but and that doesn't make it any better than somebody who's got no training whatsoever. You know, the whole point of the arts is that it's got to resonate and speak to you. You know, you think about modern language written language wasn't developed, developed 5,000 years ago. But we were drawing long before we were speaking and writing, and I think it's kind of a visceral need. We've always had the need to kind of create and leave a mark, and that's very much autobiographical. And I think the way you look at a picture, it encompasses all those things, those feelings of what it reminds you of. If it reminds you of anything, does it make you, does something make you angry? Do you kind of drift off and start thinking about something else? Those are all valid experiences when you're looking at a piece of art, a piece of sculpture. But, completely different experience to you or anybody else. We'd all see, and in terms of colour, I use a lot of high colour, it's very vibrant pigments. But we all see pigments differently, the way the light's reflecting those colours back to us. And that's endlessly fascinating, because you might see it in a completely different hue, and that's your own personal experience.
The exhibition's on at the moment. How long does it run for? It
runs until the 9th of January. So the Mercer's open Tuesday to Saturday. And then I have a show, I'm going to be part of a mixed show with Silson Contemporary, that's another gallery in Harrogate, run by Sarah, which is fantastic space. So I'm working towards that, and we'll continue just to keep painting. It's a bit of a disease.
Thank you very much.